What's up, everyone? So a massive report just came out that's got Blue Jays fans completely divided right now. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. This is not the name anyone was expecting to hear. We're talking about a potential bullpen addition that could change everything about how this roster shapes up. And depending on how you look at it, this is either a brilliant move or a major head scratcher. Stay locked in because we're breaking down all the details, the reactions, what this means for other targets, and why this might actually make way more sense than people think. All right, so here's what dropped late last night. Francis Romero, who's been extremely reliable with his reporting, especially when it comes to Cuban players and international signings, put out a report saying that according to his sources, the Toronto Blue Jays have emerged as a strong suitor for Cuban reliever Raisel Iglesias. Not only are they interested, but Toronto is actively pursuing this veteran right-hander as they look to reinforce the back end of their bullpen. Now, if you've been watching the channel, you know we've been covering all the smoke around the Jays chasing relievers this offseason. Yesterday, we talked about Ken Rosenthal's report that they've officially met with Edwin Diaz, and now this Iglesias news drops, and suddenly we've got a much clearer picture of what the front office is planning. Let me give you some context on Francis Romero's credibility here, because this matters. He's been incredibly accurate with his reporting, particularly when it comes to players from overseas and specifically Cuban talent. He was right about the Vladimir Guerrero extension talks. He's nailed multiple international signings. So when he says the Jays are actively pursuing someone, you need to take that seriously. This isn't some random speculation. This is legitimate intel. And it tells us the Blue Jays are moving fast on the bullpen market. Now, let's talk about Raisel Iglesias as a player, because I've already seen the reactions on social media, and they're all over the place. Some people are excited, some are disappointed, and I get both sides. Last season, Iglesias appeared in 70 games for the Atlanta Braves, working as their closer for a good chunk of the year. He recorded 29 saves across 57 appearances through 67 innings and posted a 3.21 ERA. Those are solid numbers, but they're not the elite shutdown closer numbers we saw from him in previous years. Go back to the year before, and he had a 1.95 ERA. The year before that, 2.75. This is a guy who's been elite for most of his career, sitting with a career 2.9 ERA. He's 35 years old, which is definitely something to consider, but he's not a velocity-dependent pitcher, which matters a lot for longevity. When you dig into his peripherals, there's a lot to like. He averages around 95 miles per hour on his fastball, which is still very good. And he's excellent at generating strikeouts and whiffs. His chase rate is elite. He doesn't give up a ton of hard contact. And while he's not a heavy ground ball pitcher, that's actually not a problem when you consider the Blue Jays have one of the best defensive units in baseball. You pair Iglesias with that defense, and suddenly his profile looks even better. Is he Edwin Diaz? No. Is he the flashiest name available? Absolutely not. But is he a very good reliever who would immediately upgrade the back end of the bullpen? 100% yes. Here's where it gets interesting. If the Blue Jays are actively pursuing Iglesias, according to Romero, it tells me one of two things is happening. Either they're holding off on Edwin Diaz because the price is getting too high, or they're trying to build an absolute super bullpen by adding multiple high-end arms. Think about it. If they land Iglesias and still go after Diaz or another top-tier reliever, you're looking at a completely rebuilt back end. Right now, you've got Jordan Romano still recovering, you've got some solid pieces, but nothing dominant. Adding Iglesias gives them a proven closer who can handle high-leverage situations immediately. Let me address the criticism I'm seeing, because I think some of it's fair and some of it's off base. People are saying Iglesias isn't their first choice. And yeah, I get that. My first choice would be Edwin Diaz every single time. But here's the reality. Diaz is going to command something like 5 years and over $100 million based on the reports we've seen. That's a massive commitment to a reliever. And while I'd personally make that deal, I understand why a front office might be hesitant. Iglesias, on the other hand, is probably looking at something in the 3-year, 30 to 40 million range. Maybe a bit more. That's a much more manageable contract, especially if you're planning to spend big elsewhere on starting pitching or position players. And that brings me to the bigger picture here. Francis Romero also reported that the Blue Jays' first move will probably be a reliever, and that the entire free agency market is leaning toward relievers signing first this winter. If that's true, and the Jays are being aggressive with Iglesias, it could mean they're trying to strike early and lock up a quality arm before the market gets crazy. That's smart front office work. You don't want to be the team sitting around waiting while everyone else snatches up the good relievers, and then you're left overpaying for someone who's not as good. Now let's talk about how this fits into the overall bullpen construction. If you slide Iglesias into the closer role, you've got Jordan Romano potentially working back from injury, you've got Yimi Garcia, who was solid last year, you've got Eric Swanson, and then you're filling out the rest with guys like Nate Pearson, if he's healthy, maybe some internal options. That's a completely different bullpen than what they had last year. And honestly, it's a much better one. People forget how important bullpen depth is. You can't just have one or two good arms. You need 4 or 5 guys who can handle big moments, and adding Iglesias gets you closer to that. But here's where the Edwin Diaz conversation comes back into play. Yesterday, we covered Ken Rosenthal's report that the Jays have met with Diaz, and there's been talk of a 5-year, $100+ million deal. If you're gonna spend that kind of money on a reliever, Diaz is the guy. He's younger than Iglesias, he's got elite stuff, he throws absolute gas, and when he's on, he's one of the most dominant closers in baseball. Last year, he posted a 1.63 ERA and was lights out for stretches. If you're going big game hunting and you want to make a statement, you pay Edwin Diaz and you build your bullpen around him. So where does that leave us? Would I be upset if they signed Iglesias instead of Diaz? Honestly, no. Iglesias is a really good reliever, and if they get him on a reasonable deal, it's a fantastic move. But if they can't afford it, and if they're serious about going all in this year, I'd rather see them pay Diaz and go for the elite arm. The Blue Jays made over $50 million in profit from their playoff run, so the money is there. The question is whether they're willing to spend it. Before I wrap this up, I want to touch on a couple other quick updates because there's a lot happening. We got confirmation that Japanese star Roki Sasaki is officially getting posted next week. John Heyman reported this, and it's huge news. Sasaki throws up to 99 miles per hour, and he's expected to be one of the top 3 free agent pitchers available alongside Corbin Burnes and Framber Valdez. The Blue Jays have been heavily linked to Sasaki, and multiple reports suggest they're going to be all in on him. Ben Nicholson-Smith has talked extensively about how aggressive the Jays are being in the starting pitching market, and Sasaki makes a ton of sense. He's young, he's got elite stuff, and he fits the timeline of what they're trying to build. It's interesting because we're hearing way more about starting pitchers and relievers for the Blue Jays than we are about position players right now. Obviously, Kyle Tucker's name is still floating around, but the focus seems to be on pitching. And honestly, that makes sense. You can have the best lineup in the world, but if your pitching isn't good enough, you're not winning anything. The Jays need to add multiple arms, both in the rotation and the bullpen. And it looks like that's exactly what they're prioritizing. So here's my final take. Raisel Iglesias is a really good reliever. He's not Edwin Diaz, but he's a proven closer with elite peripherals and a long track record of success. If the Blue Jays can sign him on a reasonable deal, it's a smart move that instantly upgrades the bullpen. Would I prefer they go after Diaz? Absolutely. But if they land Iglesias and still have money to spend on starting pitching and maybe another bat, then this could end up being the better overall strategy. Let me know what you think in the comments. Are you happy with Iglesias, or do you want them to go all in on Diaz? And what about Roki Sasaki? Drop your thoughts below, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one.